"You're making a mistake," the man said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "A career-ending mistake." The officer just laughed, shoving the suspect's head down against the cold metal of the patrol car. He thought he had caught a thug. He thought he had caught a break-in artist lurking in an upscale neighborhood. He didn't look at the badge in the man's pocket. He didn't check the plates on the sedan. Soon the radio didn't chirp with the dispatch code. It screamed with a voice that made the blood freeze in the officer's veins. This wasn't just an arrest. It was the moment the hunter realized he had just handcuffed the wolf. Stay tuned, because when the karma hits, it hits like a freight train. The rain in Oak Haven wasn't the kind that washed things clean. It was the kind that made the grime stick. It was a cold, miserable evening as dusk settled over the well-manicured lawns of the North District. Special Agent Adrian Hale sat in the driver's seat of a charcoal gray Chevy Malibu. The engine was off to conserve fuel and keep his profile low. He wasn't in one of the bureau's flashier SUVs. He was deep undercover, or at least gray undercover, blending in without a fake persona, just existing in the background where people rarely looked. Adrian adjusted the heat vent, though it wasn't blowing. He was a man with the build of someone who spent his mornings boxing and his evenings reading case files. His skin was dark, his eyes sharp and analytical, currently fixed on the colonial-style house across the street, 420 Elm, the home of Councilman Victor Langston. Langston wasn't just a local politician. He was the suspected linchpin in a massive money laundering operation moving through the state's construction contracts. Adrian had been building this RICO case for months. He wasn't here to arrest Langston, not yet. He was here to see who visited him on an evening before the city budget vote. Adrian took a sip of lukewarm coffee from a thermos. "Come on, Victor," Adrian whispered to the silence of the car. "Make the call." He was dressed for comfort, not for a press conference. He wore a heavy navy hoodie, dark jeans, and Timberland boots. To the casual observer, he didn't look like the assistant special agent in charge of the Chicago field office. To the untrained eye, he looked like a suspicious male sitting in a car in a neighborhood where the average income hovered around $250,000 a year. And unfortunately for Adrian, Officer Travis Keaton had a very untrained eye. A cruiser rolled past slowly. Adrian saw it in his rearview mirror. Unit 4 Alpha, Oak Haven, PD. He didn't flinch. He didn't duck. He just kept his eyes on the councilman's house. Federal Protocol 101. Don't act guilty, and you won't look guilty. But the cruiser didn't keep going. It braked hard. The reverse lights flared white in the gloom. Adrian sighed, his grip on the steering wheel tightening just a fraction. "Don't do it," he muttered. "Just keep driving, officer. You have no idea what you're walking into." The cruiser backed up until it was parallel with Adrian's hood. Then the blinding takedown lights flicked on, flooding the interior of the Malibu with harsh white illumination. Adrian squinted, shielding his eyes with one hand. He knew the drill. He reached slowly towards the passenger seat, where his credentials lay hidden under a newspaper. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The voice boomed over the cruiser's PA system. Adrian froze. He slowly placed both hands on the steering wheel, fingers spread wide. He was a professional. He knew that any sudden movement could be interpreted as a threat, especially by a nervous local cop. He watched in the side mirror as two officers emerged. The driver was a big man, broad shoulders, thick neck, the kind of guy who spent too much time bench pressing and not enough time de-escalating. That was Officer Travis Keaton. His reputation preceded him. Adrian had read the local precinct reports as part of his recon. Keaton had 6 excessive force complaints throughout his career, all dismissed by a friendly internal review board. The passenger was younger, skinnier, Officer Parker Ellis, a rookie barely out of the academy, looking like he was trying to grow a mustache that refused to cooperate. Ellis looked nervous. Keaton looked hungry. Adrian rolled down the window as Keaton approached, his hand resting heavily on his holstered Glock. "Good evening, officer," Adrian said. His voice was deep, steady, and devoid of fear. Keaton didn't return the greeting. He shined his flashlight directly into Adrian's eyes, blinding him. "License and registration, now." "It's a rental," Adrian said calmly, keeping his hands on the wheel. "My identification is in my jacket pocket, and my federal credentials are on the passenger seat under that paper. I'm going to reach for them slowly." "Don't you reach for a damn thing," Keaton snapped. "Out of the car." "Officer," Adrian tried again, channeling the authority he used to command task forces. "I am a federal agent conducting an active surveillance operation. If you force me out of this vehicle, you're compromising a federal investigation." Keaton let out a short, barking laugh. He looked back at Ellis, who was standing by the rear bumper, hand hovering near his taser. "You hear that, Parker?" Keaton sneered. "We got a federal agent here. Probably Special Agent Hoodie, right?" He turned back to Adrian, his face hardening. "I said, get out of the car now, or I drag you out." Adrian calculated the odds. If he resisted, Keaton would tase him or shoot him. If he complied, he blew his cover for the Langston investigation, but he stayed alive. The choice was obvious, but it tasted like bile. "I am complying," Adrian said. He unbuckled his seatbelt with slow, deliberate movements. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain. He stood noticeably taller than Keaton. For a second, the power dynamic shifted just by sheer physical presence. Keaton didn't like that. "Turn around," Keaton commanded. "Hands on the hood. Spread them." "Check my credentials, Keaton," Adrian said, using the officer's name intentionally. "They are on the seat. Just look at the badge." "Shut up!" Keaton shoved Adrian forward, slamming his chest against the wet metal of the rental car. Adrian exhaled sharply as the air left his lungs. He felt Keaton's hands patting him down aggressively, checking the waistband, the pockets. Keaton's hand brushed against the concealed holster at Adrian's hip, his service weapon, a Glock 19M. "Gun!" Keaton screamed. "He's got a gun!" "It is a service weapon," Adrian shouted, his voice finally rising. "I am FBI." But it was too late. The logic had left the building. Keaton kicked Adrian's legs apart, forcing him down to his knees in the mud. Ellis rushed forward, looking terrified. "Cuff him! Cuff him now!" Keaton roared. Adrian felt the cold steel of the handcuffs bite into his wrists. He didn't fight back. He knew that fighting back was a death sentence. Instead, he engaged a different weapon, his mind. He began to memorize everything. The procedure errors, the lack of probable cause, the specific insults Keaton was muttering. "You boys have really stepped in it," Adrian said, his cheek pressed against the wet asphalt. "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that I gave you a chance. You have the right to remain silent." Keaton spat, yanking Adrian up by the handcuffs, sending a searing pain through his shoulders. "So use it." As they dragged him toward the cruiser, Adrian looked back at the councilman's house. The curtains moved. Councilman Langston was watching. The operation was blown. Adrian Hale's eyes went cold. He wasn't just an agent anymore. He was a man who had just lost months of work to a bully with a badge. And now He was going to destroy that bully's career with the precision of a surgeon. The back of a police interceptor is designed to be uncomfortable. It is a hard plastic shell smelling of old sweat, vomit, and industrial cleaner. Adrian sat awkwardly, his hands cuffed behind his back, his knees pressed against the cage divider. In the front seat, the atmosphere was electric, but for the wrong reasons. Keaton was high on adrenaline, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as he merged back onto the main road. Ellis, the rookie, was sitting in the passenger seat looking back at Adrian through the plexiglass. "Travis," Ellis said softly, "maybe we should have checked that ID." "He really didn't act like a perp." "Don't be a snowflake, Parker," Keaton scoffed, checking his rearview mirror to glare at Adrian. Everyone's a lawyer or a fed when they get caught. Guy was sitting outside a councilman's house in a hoodie, probably casing the joint for a robbery. We just saved the neighborhood. Adrian leaned forward as much as the cuffs would allow. "Officer Ellis, is it?" Ellis jumped slightly. "Yeah." "Check the computer," Adrian said. His voice was calm, muffled slightly by the glass. "Run the plate of the Malibu. It's a fleet rental registered to the U.S. General Services Administration. Run my name, Adrian Hale." "Don't run squat," Keaton ordered. "We book him as John Doe if he doesn't have ID on him. Let the desk sergeant sort it out." "You left my ID in the car," Adrian said, "which is a violation of procedure. You also left my vehicle unlocked on a public street with a federal firearm inside." "That's a felony, Keaton. Negligence." Keaton slammed on the brakes at a red light, turning around to shout through the glass. "You shut your mouth. You're in my world now, pal. You speak when spoken to." "You don't have much time," Adrian said. Keaton frowned. "What?" "We are not far from the precinct," Adrian analyzed, "but my team tracks my vitals via my smart watch. They know my heart rate just spiked. They know I've stopped moving. They are tracking the GPS of the car. If I don't check in soon, a distress signal goes out. Soon after that, the cavalry arrives." Adrian paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "That's how long you have to pull over, uncuff me, and pray I don't file charges for assault on a federal officer." Keaton laughed, but it sounded forced this time. "You watch too many movies." But Ellis wasn't laughing. The rookie's hands were shaking as he reached for the onboard laptop. He began typing. "What are you doing?" Keaton snapped. "I'm just checking." Ellis's voice cracked. "If he's lying, we add impersonating an officer to the charges. It strengthens our case." Keaton grunted, but didn't stop him. The light turned green. The rain hammered against the roof. Adrian closed his eyes and began to count the seconds. In the front seat, the rhythmic clicking of the keyboard was the only sound. Then silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. "Travis," Ellis whispered. "What?" "Travis, pull over." "I'm not pulling over." Travis, pull the car over now." Ellis screamed, his voice pitching up into hysteria. Keaton swerved slightly, startled by the rookie's outburst. "What the hell is your problem?" Ellis turned the laptop screen towards the driver. "Look at the return on the name. Look at the clearance level. It's Red 1 classified. Top secret clearance." Keaton squinted at the screen. The color drained from his face faster than the rain running down the windshield. The screen didn't look like a normal criminal history check. It was flashing a bright red banner. "Federal agent, do not detain. Contact SAC, Chicago, immediately." Below that was a photo of Adrian Hale in a suit, looking stern, and his title, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Organized Crime Division. "Oh no," Keaton breathed. "Oh no." "I told you," came the voice from the back seat. Keaton's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. "It's fake," he stammered. "It's got to be a hack. People can hack these things." "It's the NCIC database, Travis," Ellis yelled. "You can't hack the NCIC from the back of a cop car. We just arrested the head of the FBI's organized crime unit." "Uncuff him," Keaton said, his voice trembling. We stop. We let him go. We say it was a misunderstanding." "Too late," Adrian said. "You already called it in. Dispatch knows you have a suspect. If you let me go now, without processing, it's kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment." "You're already in this quicksand, Keaton. Stop struggling. You'll only sink faster." Keaton panicked. He did the worst thing possible. He doubled down. "No," Keaton said, his eyes wild. "We bring him in. We find something on him. He had a gun. He was threatening us. We stick to the story. It's his word against ours." Ellis looked at Keaton like he was insane. "Are you crazy? He's the FBI." "He's a suspect," Keaton roared. "And we're the police. We run this town, not the feds." Adrian shook his head in the darkness. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, but it wasn't the bored voice of the dispatcher. It was the chief of police, Chief Malcolm Greer. "Unit 4 Alpha, this is Chief Greer. What is your location? Over." Keaton grabbed the mic, his hands sweating. Chief, we're southbound on Main, bringing in a 1015, resisting arrest, possession of a concealed weapon." There was a pause on the radio, a pause that lasted an eternity. "4 Alpha," the chief's voice came back, tight and strained. "I have the special agent in charge of the Chicago FBI on my personal line. He says you have one of his men. He says his agent's panic beacon just triggered. Stop the vehicle immediately." Keaton dropped the mic. It dangled from the dashboard by its cord, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Adrian leaned back against the hard plastic seat and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. "Time's up," Adrian said. Blue and red lights erupted in front of them. Not one car, 6 unmarked black SUVs swerved across the median, blocking all lanes of traffic. SWAT trucks mounted the curb. The sky above them began to chop with the sound of a low-flying helicopter. Keaton slammed on the brakes, sending the cruiser into a skid. They came to a halt, surrounded by a wall of federal steel. "Open the door, Keaton," Adrian commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "And pray." The intersection of Main Street and 4th Avenue looked less like a rainy suburban road and more like a war zone. The air was vibrating, literally vibrating with the thrum of the helicopter hovering just above the tree line, its spotlight pinning Officer Keaton's cruiser to the asphalt like a bug under a microscope. Inside the cruiser, the silence was deafening, broken only by the hyperventilating breaths of Rookie Officer Ellis. "What do we do?" Ellis squeaked, his hands hovering uselessly over the dashboard. "Travis, what do we do?" Officer Travis Keaton didn't answer. He was staring through the rain-slicked windshield at the wall of black SUVs. Doors flew open. Men and women in body armor poured out. They didn't move like patrol cops. They moved with fluid, terrifying precision. They carried carbines, not pistols. On the back of their tactical vests, huge yellow letters spelled out. The 3 letters Keaton had been praying were a lie. FBI. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker on the lead SUV. It wasn't the polite warning Keaton had given Adrian. It was a command from God. "Driver of the police vehicle, throw the keys out the window. Exit the vehicle walking backwards, hands on your head. Do it now." Keaton's ego, inflated by years of bullying locals, suddenly punctured. He looked at the rearview mirror. Adrian Hale was just watching him. The agent wasn't smiling anymore. His expression was one of profound, exhausted disappointment. "Open the door, Keaton," Adrian said again. "Don't make them breach. You won't like the breach." Keaton's hand shook as he rolled down the window. He tossed the keys. They clattered onto the wet road. He opened the door and stepped out into the blinding lights. "Walk backwards," the voice screamed. Keaton complied. He felt the rain soaking his uniform, weighing him down. He felt small. For the first time in his career, he felt exactly how every suspect he'd ever harassed felt: helpless. Strong hands grabbed him. He was spun around, slammed against the side of his own cruiser, the exact same way he had slammed Adrian earlier. But these hands were professional. They checked him for weapons efficiently, stripping his Glock, his taser, and his backup piece in seconds. "Officer Travis Keaton?" a voice asked. Keaton looked up. Standing in front of him was a man in a trench coat flanked by two tactical operators. This was Special Agent in Charge, Elias Crow. He looked like a man who ate gravel for breakfast. "Yes," Keaton croaked. "I am a police officer. I was performing a traffic stop." "You are under arrest," Crow interrupted, his voice cutting like a razor. "Title 18, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under color of law, also obstruction of a federal investigation, assault on a federal officer, and kidnapping." "Kidnapping?" Keaton shouted as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists. "I arrested a suspect." "You abducted a federal agent," Crow corrected. He leaned in close, his nose inches from Keaton's. "You see that man you put in the cage?" Crow pointed. Two agents were carefully helping Adrian out of the back seat. They didn't handle him like a criminal. They handled him like a brother. One agent was already using a key to unlock the handcuffs. Another was draping a dry jacket over Adrian's shoulders. Adrian rubbed his wrists, grimacing. He walked over to where Keaton was being held. The circle of agents parted to let him through. Adrian looked at Keaton. He looked at the mud on his own knees. He looked at the rookie, Ellis, who was crying while being zip-tied by another agent near the trunk. "I told you," Adrian said softly. "You set me up," Keaton spat, trying to salvage some shred of his pride. "You were bait." Adrian laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I wasn't bait for you, Keaton. You're not that important. I was hunting a whale. You're just the bottom feeder that swam into the net." Adrian turned to Crow. "Elias, did we get the audio?" Crow tapped his earpiece. "Clear as day. The wire you were wearing picked up everything. The refusal to check ID, the threats, the assault. It's all recorded. Cloud upload finished." Keaton's face went pale. A wire. The Hoodie. The suspicious agent. Adrian had been wired for sound to record the councilman. Instead, he had recorded the entire illegal arrest. "Get him out of my sight," Adrian waved his hand, "and take the rookie in separately. He wanted to check the ID. He might be salvageable as a witness." "You can't do this," Keaton screamed as they dragged him toward a black SUV. "I know the chief. I know the mayor." Adrian didn't turn around. He walked to the trunk of the rental car, which the FBI forensics team was already dusting, and retrieved his credentials. He clipped his badge onto his belt. "Elias," Adrian said, looking at the Oak Haven police station down the road. "Change of plans. We aren't going to the field office." "No?" Crow asked. "No," Adrian said, his eyes hard. Keaton was too confident. He said we run this town. He wasn't scared of the consequences. That tells me this isn't an isolated incident. That tells me the rot goes deeper." Adrian looked at the flashing lights of the local precinct in the distance. "We're going to the station," Adrian declared. "I want to see who comes to bail him out. We're taking over the precinct." The Oak Haven Police Precinct was usually a quiet place in the evening, but tonight it looked like an anthill that had been kicked over. The lobby was full of suits. FBI agents were seizing computers. A tactical team was guarding the exits. The local cops were standing against the walls, looking confused and terrified, their hands hovering near their belts, but terrified to touch them. Chief of Police Malcolm Greer was sweating through his white shirt. He stood in the middle of the bullpen, trying to regain control of his station. "This is unprecedented," Greer shouted at the swarm of agents. "You cannot just waltz in here and commandeer my station. I want to see a warrant." The double doors swung open. The room went silent. Adrian Hale walked in. He was still wearing the muddy jeans and the hoodie, but he walked with the stride of a king. Flanking him were SAC Crow and 4 tactical agents. Adrian walked straight up to the chief. He didn't stop until he was in Greer's personal space. "You want a warrant?" Adrian asked. He pulled a folded document from his back pocket and slapped it against the chief's chest. "Seizure authorized by a federal judge. We are seizing all dash cam footage, all body cam logs, and all arrest records from recent years." Chief Greer looked at Adrian, then at the badge on his belt. He swallowed hard. "Agent Hale, Look, Keaton is a hothead. We know that. We can handle this internally. There's no need to turn this into a circus." "It's not a circus, Chief," Adrian said calmly. "It's a crime scene. And right now, this building is the evidence." Adrian turned to the holding cells. "Bring me Keaton." Soon, Adrian sat in the interrogation room. It was the same room where Keaton had intimidated hundreds of suspects. Now, Keaton was cuffed to the table, staring at the two-way mirror. Adrian walked in alone. He carried a plastic cup of water and a thick file folder. He sat down opposite Keaton. He didn't speak. He just opened the file and began reading. "Travis Keaton," Adrian read aloud. "Decorated officer. 3 commendations for drug busts, 6 complaints for excessive force." "And interesting." Adrian looked up. "You own a boat, Keaton, a Sea Ray?" Keaton glared. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It's an $80,000 boat," Adrian noted, "on a salary of $65 grand a year. And you paid cash?" Keaton shifted in his seat. "I inherited money." "Oh, we checked," Adrian said. "Your parents died broke. You have no inheritance, but you do have a very interesting relationship with Councilman Langston's construction crews. We found deposits, Keaton, small ones under 10 grand, so they don't flag the IRS, but lots of them." Adrian leaned forward. The twist wasn't just the arrest, it was the scope. "I wasn't at 420 Elm Street to catch the councilman," Adrian lied smoothly. He wanted to see Keaton squirm. "We already have the councilman. We have him on racketeering. He flipped days ago." This was a bluff. The councilman hadn't flipped yet, but Keaton didn't know that. Keaton's eyes went wide. "What?" "Langston gave us a list," Adrian continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A list of police officers on his payroll, officers who looked the other way when his trucks moved through the city, officers who harass his political rivals, officers who arrest suspicious people parked outside his house to keep his meetings secret." Adrian slammed his hand on the table. Keaton jumped. "You weren't protecting the neighborhood," Adrian roared. "You were protecting the operation. You saw a car watching your boss, and you tried to scare me off. But you were too stupid to realize I wasn't a rival gang member. You tried to muscle the Federal Bureau of Investigation." "I didn't know," Keaton cried. The tough guy facade completely shattering. Langston told me to keep the street clear on evenings, that's all. He pays me $500 a week just to patrol that block. I didn't know about the laundering. Adrian sat back, a satisfied smile touching his lips. He glanced at the mirror. He knew Crow was recording. Keaton had just confessed to corruption. $500 a week, Adrian murmured. You threw your life away for $500 a week? I can help you, Keaton pleaded, leaning over the table, rattling the cuffs. I can testify against Langston. I can give you the others. There's more. Sergeant Donovan, Officer Blaine, they're all in on it. Adrian stood up. He walked to the door and knocked twice. You'll testify all right, Adrian said, but not for a deal. You'll testify because you have no choice. You're going to federal prison, Keaton, for a long, long time. And do you know what happens to dirty cops in federal prison? Adrian opened the door. They become very popular, Adrian said coldly. He stepped out into the hallway where Chief Creer was standing with SAC Crow. The chief looked like he was about to faint. Did you get that? Adrian asked. Crow held up a digital recorder, loud and clear. He named Sergeant Donovan and Officer Blaine. We're rounding them up now. Adrian turned to the chief. Chief Creer, it seems your department has a systemic infection. I'm afraid I'm going to have to place you under administrative review until we determine if you knew about Keaton's side hustle. I didn't, Creer protested. I swear. Then you have nothing to worry about, Adrian said, walking past him. But right now I have a councilman to visit, and this time I'm not going to sit in the car. Adrian walked towards the exit, the sea of FBI agents parting for him. He was tired. His wrists were bruised and his clothes were muddy. But as he stepped back out into the night rain, he felt lighter. He had gone looking for a white-collar criminal. He had ended up cleaning up a police department, but the night wasn't over. The karma train had one more stop, because while Keaton was crying in the interrogation room, the dashcam footage of the arrest was being processed, and Adrian knew exactly where it was going to go. The court of public opinion was about to open session. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but the internet moves at the speed of light. While Adrian Hale was busy dismantling the corruption ring within the Oak Haven Police Department, the digital world was about to ignite. It wasn't Adrian who leaked the footage. He was too disciplined, too by the book. It was rookie officer Parker Ellis. In a desperate bid to secure immunity and prove he wasn't like his partner, Ellis's attorney had inadvertently allowed the dashcam file to be included in a public records request filed by a local journalist, Simon Thorpe. In the morning, the video titled Oak Haven Cop versus FBI Agent The Mistake went live. By mid-morning, it had thousands of views. By noon, it had millions. The video was a perfect storm of outrage. The audio was crisp. Viewers watched in horror as Adrian, calm and compliant, was bullied, mocked, and assaulted. They heard Keaton's arrogance. They heard the racial slurs muttered under his breath. They heard the chilling line, "We run this town." But the climax, the moment the screen flashed red with the federal clearance warning, and Keaton's face crumbled, became the most shared clip on the planet. For Travis Keaton, who had been released on a massive bond pending trial, the real punishment began before he ever stepped foot in a courtroom. He was sitting in his kitchen, staring at a bowl of cereal he couldn't eat when his phone started buzzing. It wasn't a text, it was a deluge, hundreds of notifications per minute. He opened Twitter. His name was trending. Hashtag Travis Keatonize a criminal. Hashtag Fire Keaton. He went to Facebook. His profile was flooded with comments. People from his high school, people he had bullied years ago, strangers from other countries. They were all there. "Remember when you gave me a ticket for going 2 over? Karma's coming. You're a tough guy. Not so tough now, are you?" Keaton threw his phone across the room. It cracked against the wall. He heard a noise outside. He walked to the window and peered through the blinds. There were news vans, 4 of them. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and the local affiliate. A reporter was standing on his lawn, pointing at his front door. "We are live outside the home of the disgraced officer," the reporter was saying. Keaton's wife, Linda, walked into the kitchen. She was dressed in a suit, carrying a suitcase. She looked tired. She looked done. "Where are you going?" Keaton asked, his voice cracking. "My mother's," Linda said. She didn't look at him. "I can't do this, Travis. The threats, the shame. I can't go to the grocery store without people spitting on the ground when they see me. I lost my job at the bank this morning. They said I'm a distraction." "You can't leave me," Keaton pleaded. "I'm going to beat this." "It was a misunderstanding." Linda stopped at the door. She finally looked at him, and the look was worse than anger. It was pity. "I saw the video, Travis. You weren't a cop. You were a monster, and you were stupid." She walked out. The door slammed. Keaton watched her get into her car, ignoring the reporters shouting questions at her. The hard karma wasn't finished. An hour later, a tow truck backed into his driveway. A large man in coveralls jumped out and started hooking up Keaton's prized possession, the Sea Ray boat. Keaton ran out the front door, forgetting the reporters. Hey, you can't take that." The repo man didn't stop. He handed Keaton a clipboard. "Bank called the loan, breach of contract, plus the IRS put a freeze on your assets about an hour ago. Something about undeclared income." The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted, "Officer Keaton, do you have a comment on the corruption charges? Officer Keaton, is it true you were working for Councilman Langston?" Keaton stood there in his sweatpants watching his boat, the symbol of his ill-gotten gains, being dragged away. He was alone. His wife was gone. His career was dead, and the entire world was watching him cry. Meanwhile, across town, Adrian Hale sat in a quiet diner, eating a slice of cherry pie. On the TV above the counter, the news was playing the clip of Keaton's arrest. The waitress poured him a refill of coffee. "Can you believe that guy?" she asked, pointing at the screen with the pot. "Thinking he could bully the FBI. Glad they got him." Adrian smiled, taking a sip. "Yeah, me too." He didn't tell her who he was. He didn't need the fame. He just needed the win. Months later, the Federal District Court of Illinois was packed to the rafters. This wasn't a local traffic court. This was the big leagues. The room smelled of mahogany and floor wax. The seal of the United States hung high above the judge's bench. Travis Keaton sat at the defense table. He looked years older. His hair was thinning, his skin pasty. He wore a cheap suit that didn't fit right. His good suits had been seized as evidence of purchases made with laundered money. His lawyer was a court-appointed public defender named Leland Finch. Finch was a decent lawyer, but he looked exhausted. Defending the most hated man in America was not an easy gig. On the other side of the aisle sat the prosecution. Leading the charge was Assistant U.S. Attorney Damon Reeves. Reeves was known as the Hammer. He didn't lose. And sitting next to him in a crisp charcoal suit was Special Agent Adrian Hale. The presiding judge was Evelyn Markham. She was a legend in the circuit. Fair but terrifyingly strict. She tapped her gavel. The court is now in session. United States of America versus Travis Keaton. Charges: deprivation of civil rights, conspiracy to commit racketeering, assault on a federal officer. The trial lasted weeks, but the outcome felt inevitable from day one. The prosecution's case was a masterclass. They didn't just play the video, they dissected it. Adrian took the stand on the third day. He walked with the same calm authority he had shown on the street. He swore in. "Agent Hale," Reeves asked, pacing in front of the jury, "why didn't you identify yourself immediately?" "I attempted to," Adrian said, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "I stated my credentials were on the seat. I stated the weapon was a service pistol. Officer Keaton refused to look. He was not interested in the truth. He was interested in dominance." "And did you feel your life was in danger?" "I did," Adrian answered. "Officer Keaton's behavior was erratic, aggressive, and violated every standard of police procedure. If I'd moved my hand to retrieve my badge, I believe he would have shot me." The jury, 12 men and women from diverse backgrounds, looked at Keaton. Their eyes were cold. Then came the defense. Leland Finch tried his best. "Officer Keaton," Finch said to his client on the stand, "did you know he was an FBI agent?" "No," Keaton sobbed. He was trying to cry, but the tears looked forced. "I was scared. It was a high crime area. I thought he was reaching for a gun. I just wanted to go home to my family." "And the money?" Reeves asked on cross-examination, standing up slowly. "The deposits from Councilman Langston." That was a loan," Keaton stammered. "A loan?" Reeves repeated flatly. "A loan that you never paid back. A loan that coincided exactly with the dates you harassed Langston's political opponents." Keaton looked at the gallery. He saw Councilman Victor Langston sitting in the back row wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles. Langston had already been convicted. He was there as a witness against Keaton. And here came the twist Adrian had orchestrated. Reeves called his surprise witness. Councilman Langston himself. Langston took the stand, looking bitter. He had cut a deal to shave years off his sentence, and the price of that deal was Travis Keaton. "Mr. Langston," Reeves asked, "did you pay Officer Keaton to protect the neighborhood?" "No," Langston sneered. "I paid him to be my muscle." "But here's the thing." Langston looked directly at Keaton, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It wasn't my idea." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Keaton looked confused. "Explain," Judge Markham ordered. "Keaton came to me," Langston said. "Years ago, he found out about the construction contracts. He didn't arrest me. He blackmailed me. He said for $2,000 a month he'd keep the cops away. If I didn't pay, he'd raid my job sites." Keaton stood up, knocking his chair over. "That's a lie. You're lying." "Sit down, Mr. Keaton," the judge roared. Marshals stepped forward, hands on their weapons. "He's the one who ran the ring," Langston shouted over the gavel. "I was just the money. Keaton organized the patrol schedules. He recruited the other dirty cops. He was the boss." The courtroom erupted. This was the dagger. Keaton wasn't just a pawn. According to Langston, he was a predator who had bitten the hand that fed him. It didn't matter if Langston was telling the whole truth or just spreading the blame. The damage was done. The jury saw Keaton not as a bumbling cop, but as a mastermind of corruption. Adrian watched Keaton unravel. He watched the man hyperventilate, realizing that his victim defense had just been nuked from orbit. The verdict took the jury less than a day. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Count after count. 15 counts total. Judge Markham looked at Keaton over her spectacles. The courtroom was silent. "Travis Keaton," she said, "you have disgraced the uniform. You have betrayed the public trust. You treated the law as your personal weapon. You bullied the weak. And when you finally met someone strong, you tried to lie your way out of it." She shuffled her papers. "This court has no sympathy for bullies. For the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law combined with the racketeering charges, I'm sentencing you to 35 years in a federal penitentiary." 35 years. Keaton's knees gave out. He collapsed into his chair, sobbing uncontrollably. He was 34 years old. He would be an old man when or if he ever got out. "And," the judge added, "I'm recommending you serve this time at USB Coleman." Keaton looked up, eyes wide with terror. USB Coleman was a high-security facility. It was known for housing many of the gang members Keaton had arrested over the years. "Court is adjourned." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Adrian stood up and buttoned his jacket. He didn't look back at Keaton being dragged away by the marshals. He walked out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sun. Reporters swarmed him on the steps of the courthouse. "Agent Hale! Agent Hale! How do you feel? Is justice served?" Adrian stopped at the microphones. He looked into the cameras. "Justice isn't a feeling," Adrian said, his voice grave. "It's a process. Today, the process worked. But let this be a message. The badge isn't a shield to hide behind. It's a burden to carry. If you drop it, don't expect us to pick it up for you." He walked through the crowd towards his car. But the story wasn't quite over. Keaton was gone. Langston was gone. But Adrian had mentioned the infection in the precinct. And infections, if not treated fully, have a nasty habit of coming back. As Adrian got into his car, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Agent Hale," a distorted voice whispered. "You got Keaton. Good for you. But you didn't get the money." Adrian froze. "Who is this?" "Keaton had a partner, not a cop, a silent partner. You think the laundered money was just for boats? There's 5 million missing, Agent, and you're never going to find it." The line went dead. Adrian looked at the phone, then at the courthouse. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves. The hard karma had hit Keaton. But the game was just beginning. The phone call had ended, but the silence it left behind was louder than a siren. 5 million missing. "You're never going to find it." Adrian Hale sat in his car, rain drumming on the roof, just like the night it all started. He replayed the distorted voice in his head. It wasn't a gangster's voice. The cadence was too precise. The grammar was too perfect. He pulled up the case file on his secure tablet. He scrolled past Travis Keaton's mugshot, past Councilman Langston's confession, until he reached the financial forensics report. The Bureau had seized the house, the boat, the cars. They had frozen Keaton's police pension. But the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the report showed they had been accessed and drained hours ago. Adrian tapped the screen. Who had access? Keaton was in custody. Langston was in custody. He looked at the personal data section for Travis Keaton, spouse, Linda Keaton, occupation, senior branch manager, Oak Haven First National Bank. Adrian's eyes narrowed. He remembered the scene at the house. Linda walking out with a suitcase, the tears, the pity. "I can't do this, Travis." He had assumed she was leaving a sinking ship. He hadn't considered she might be the one who drilled the hole in the hull. Adrian fired up the engine. He didn't call for backup. He didn't call Crow. He dialed the Port Authority. "This is Special Agent Hale," he barked. "I need a flight manifest check. Private charters departing soon. Look for the name Linda Keaton. Or," he glanced at her maiden name in the file, "Linda Voss." There was a pause. The keyboard clacking on the other end was frantic. "Agent Hale, we have a Linda Voss listed on a charter to Belize. Wheels up soon from Hangar 4. "Stop that plane," Adrian commanded. "Ground it. National security hold." The private airfield was slick with rain. A sleek Gulfstream jet sat on the tarmac, engines whining as they spooled up. Adrian's car screeched onto the tarmac, bypassing the security gate with lights flashing. He drifted the sedan to a halt right in front of the jet's nose gear. He stepped out, his badge raised high. The pilot cut the engines. The whine died down to a low moan. The cabin door opened. Linda Keaton stood there. She wasn't wearing the frantic, tear-stained face of the abused wife anymore. She was wearing a Chanel suit and a look of cold, calculated annoyance. "You're interrupting my vacation, Agent Hale," she called down, her voice steady. Adrian walked to the bottom of the stairs. "The vacation is cancelled, Linda, and so is the transfer." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, descending the stairs slowly. "I divorced Travis this morning. I'm a free woman. I have no involvement in his crimes." "You didn't just know about the crimes," Adrian said, stepping closer. "You structured them. Keaton was the muscle. Langston was the face. But you were the bank." Adrian pulled out his phone. "We traced the IP address of the transfer. It didn't come from a hacker. It came from a tablet registered to your iCloud account. You moved $5 million while the jury was reading the verdict. You thought everyone would be too busy watching your husband cry to notice the money moving." Linda stopped. The mask slipped just for a second. "Travis is an idiot," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "He thought he was a king because he had a badge. He bullied everyone, me included. For years, I washed his money, I hid his tracks, and I listened to him brag. I earned that money. It's my severance package." "It's evidence," Adrian corrected. "And you just confessed to money laundering and wire fraud." Linda smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. "You can't prove I knew the source was illegal. I thought it was consulting fees." "Linda," Adrian said softly, "you worked at a bank. You know the know your customer laws better than I do." And he pointed to the jet. "You chartered a non-extradition flight under a maiden name. That's flight to avoid prosecution. That's consciousness of guilt." Sirens wailed in the distance. The local police, the new local police under new leadership, were closing in. Linda looked at the approaching lights, then back at Adrian. Her shoulders slumped. The game was over. "He's going to rot in there, isn't he?" she asked quietly. 35 years, Adrian confirmed. "Good," she whispered. She held out her wrists. "At least in prison. I won't have to listen to him anymore." Epilogue: The Shared Fate. Months later, USP Coleman is a hard place. It is concrete, steel, and noise. Inmate 89402, formerly Officer Travis Keaton, was mopping the floor of the cafeteria. He kept his head down. He had learned quickly that in here he wasn't the hunter. He was the prey. The other inmates knew he was a cop. He had to pay protection money just to keep his teeth. A guard walked by. "Keaton, you got mail?" Keaton dropped the mop. His heart leaped. Maybe it was an appeal. Maybe it was Linda saying she forgave him, that she would wait for him. He took the envelope. It was from the Department of Justice. He tore it open. It wasn't a letter. It was a notification of inmate transfer. Inmate Linda Voss Keaton. Location USP Coleman. Female camp. Status: sentenced to 12 years for money laundering. Keaton stared at the paper. She hadn't got away. She was here, in the same complex, just across the fence. He walked to the window. Through the layers of chain link and razor wire, he could see the exercise yard of the women's camp. He saw a figure walking alone in a gray jumpsuit. He pressed his hand against the glass. "Linda," he whispered. She stopped. She looked across the yard towards his building. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She just turned her back and kept walking. Keaton slid down the wall to the floor. The karma hadn't just hit him, it had swallowed his whole world. He had lost his job, his freedom, his money, and his wife. And he had done it all because he was too proud to check an ID. The final scene. Adrian Hale stood on the pier in Chicago, looking out at the dark water of Lake Michigan. The wind was cold, biting at his face. His phone buzzed. A text from SAC, Crow. Case closed. Keaton and wife processed. All assets recovered. City Council is holding a special election. You did good, Adrian. Adrian put the phone away. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like a garbage man who had finished a long shift. He pulled a coin from his pocket, a challenge coin from his old unit. He flipped it into the air, caught it, and shoved it back into his pocket. "Not much time," he said to the wind. He turned up his collar and walked back toward the city lights. There were other towns, other corrupt officials, other bullies thinking they ran the world. And Adrian Hale was just getting started. And that is the story of how moments of arrogance cost a man his entire life. Officer Keaton thought the badge made him a god. He thought he could bully, intimidate, and take whatever he wanted. But he forgot the most important rule of the jungle. There is always a bigger predator. In the end, it wasn't just the FBI that took him down. It was his own ego. He had every chance to stop, every chance to apologize, but he chose the hard way. And karma delivered the bill with interest. What do you think? Did the sentence fit the crime? And was Linda just as guilty as her husband? Or was she a victim who broke bad? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, stay safe, stay humble, and always check the ID.